Hello, John Hively here. Today we're going to continue with the history of the United States oligarchy. You know, the guys that run everything right now, the guys who determine what bills and legislation, what wars we fight, things like that. Very profitable wars. The oligarchs who are in charge right now of both major political parties. They're in charge of the government, all three branches. And of course, they're doing it at your expense. So, if you have seen episode 3, well, this is episode 3A. So if you've seen episode 3, this one has a few more details, and you might want to skip it if you got something better to do, and I hope you do. But for those of you who have not seen episode 3, episode 3A is pretty cool if you want some information on how the oligarchs came to rule the United States. So I'm going to do this real quick. I don't want to sit here and waste time. Besides, it looks like the sun might be coming out. And I don't want to sit here all day talking at you guys. Anyway, so the Great Depression hits. The stock prices drop. And I've covered this earlier, like 90 to 95%. The oligarchs get 69 to 100% of their income and wealth from stocks, from the stock market, capital gains, dividends, etc., etc. So their political power is vanquished. FDR takes over. It establishes democracy. The income from the wealthy that the wealthy get, the top 1%, drops. So in 1929, they were getting about 36% of the total income produced in the United States. That left only 64% for everybody else. They had to split that. And then by and I'm going to use my high-tech chart here. Don't laugh. Anyway, in 1941, in the United States, the top 1%, well, they dropped from 36% in 1929 to receiving 21% of the total income produced in the United States in 1941. So World War II comes along. President Truman comes along. Then labor unions are springing up all over, and they're going on strike. They're demanding higher pay. The oligarchs want lower pay. They want lower pay for you and me and higher pay for them. It's a classic class warfare thing. Anyway, so Eisenhower runs for president in 1952, and you want to see the stark difference? You want to understand the stark difference between democracy in 1952 and oligarchy now? Well, right now, Social Security is in turmoil and facing a budget shortfall. Is anybody talking about strengthening Social Security? Hell no. In 1952, Eisenhower ran on a platform, including television ads, in which he looked you right in the face and he said, I'm going to strengthen Social Security. And nobody's saying that now. In 1953, as President of the United States, he strengthened Social Security. Well, that put some more taxes on business and your pocket too. And so in 1950, the wealthy's income, total amount of income they received, was down to 17.5%. And then it was down to 13.8% by the time of the Montgomery bus boycott. And then the Civil Rights Movement hits in 1951. Actually, it had started much earlier, but that's the big event that kind of exploded the Civil Rights Movement into everybody's consciousness and in newsrooms. So African Americans demanded equal pay for equal works, as well as equal civil rights, voting rights, etc., etc., etc. And they got it, but that required some legislation, which cut into corporate profits, and then, which the wealthy rely on. So then the 1960s come up, the environmental movement, sprang up. Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, came along, and DDT was banned. That cost corporations money. There was a lot of pollution going on. There were a lot of the environmental movement demanded legislation to curb pollution. People were tired of swimming in rivers that caught on fire. Damn it! And so that legislation cut into corporate profits. The women's movement came along, and women demanded equal pay for equal work, as well as equal rights. In other ways, the anti-war movement sprang up, and what happened? Well, that war was very profitable for the wealthy. And of course, the last thing they wanted was an end to that war. And but there was a drawdown due to the anti-war movement, so that by 1973 we were out of the Vietnam War. I think it was 73. And by 1970, the total income produced in the United States, the wealthy only got 10.4%. And recall, so they relied on the stock market for 69 to 100% of their wealth. And the stock markets have been dropping, like the Dow Jones Industrials had dropped, I think, since 67 through 1970. And it just dropped. So the wealthy were facing a crisis. Democracy was cutting into their profits. Oh, yeah. They were just sitting there thinking about how, as they were sitting on their immense yachts, floating around the Caribbean, sunning themselves on their decks, drinking their $500 martinis and their $100, $1,000 bottles of whiskey, how bad they had it off. Oh, it's bad. Democracy's bad. We've got to destroy it. Well, guess what? In 1968, they elected a president who was bent on destroying democracy. And that guy, that President Nixon, and we'll go into this story later, he nominated a genocidal tobacco attorney. That's what I'd call him, Lewis Powell, a genocidal tobacco attorney, and to the Supreme Court. And now we're going to save the rest of the story for the next episode. Anyway, have a good one. Bye.